Sorry, I still love this intro. I'm super excited about tonight. Actually, I'm interested to hear what you guys say tonight and where everybody's tuning in from. So today I am in Central Florida. I was doing some training out here with the Ross, with APC and the Ross Carbonites. So kind of where this idea came from was talking to the crews on the ground today, the last couple of days, and doing that. Before we get there, though, obviously we got our amazing co-host tonight, Austin Jackson. Are you there, brother? I think we're here. There we go. Yay.
Good night. Good night. What's going on? Oh, how's
What's
everything?
Good, man? It's good.
Omar, welcome to Orlando. You can't even say Central Florida. You in the O.
I'm in the O. Yes, I know. I love it, dude. I was trying to go to Hakkasan. It's one of my favorite places out here.
Okay, we'll discuss that later. But welcome and good night to everybody on the AV Educate community. It's good to be back with you guys again tonight. Always good to be in tune with you guys. Like we always say, drop in the comments. Let's see where you're tuning in from.
Yep.
And tonight, I feel like we got some great things that we actually want to tap into. A pretty interesting show. But this week, like every other week that we've been asking for before, we want to try to make it interactive because tonight I feel like we want to have a little bit more of a discussion. It is kind of opinion based, what you like, what's your preference based on things that we've seen. So let's kind of make sure that this is interactive. If you have any questions, chime in. Omar, I'd be more than happy to pull you up on screen. But Omar, let's take it from there.
Yeah. So for now, what I want to do is, again, if, like Austin just said, if you guys want to join us in this debate, kind of talk to us, separate fact from opinion here. We'd love to have you on. So we're going to drop a little link for you there. Literally just click on that link. It'll bring you to the backstage here. Amanda, our partner in crime here, she will make sure you guys look good and pretty for us. And she will bring you live with us and you can be in this. So not only can you comment on the chat, so we can pull you up, right? So I just see some comments coming in now. Gibson Georges, Fort Lauderdale, just got back from Atlanta 2 hours ago. Hey, Gibson, bro, I should have wrote down with you. Anyways, so like,
you trying to leave us already?
No, I couldn't leave tonight. But I see it. So we just clicked on Gibson. Gibson pops up here, and we can read your guys' comments live and give you credit for it, or you could join us in the conversation live with us. And the real question is there's kind of this evolution going on for the pandemic, right? With when it comes to switching video content in particular. And the reason that I worded this the way I did is because I wanted to see if anybody. Oh, Chuck, man, please click on a link. Jump in with us. I'd love to have you live with us. What's up, Chuck? Glad you're here with us. My thing is, now that we have all these other options, right? We have more software-based switchers, and Austin, we kind of just talking about this before, and Austin, you had some input on this side. So let me reiterate what we talked about a little bit backstage here before we started. Now that we have software, right? And I'll use Vmix for example for this because Vmix is a popular piece of gear right now. Vmix is software, and we are building hardware for that software so that we can now control that better. But our keyboards, essentially, our input, our outputs, are becoming our controls for that software. Why, and is that really a switcher, or is it this Vmix fall into that kind of media server realm because we're bringing in content virtually, right? Salvador Garcia, man, Kate from Texas, man, I love Texas. Thanks for being here with us tonight, brother. So then we have the opposite of that, right? So let's talk about Blackmagic, for example. Blackmagic comes with both options, software and hardware. But Blackmagic, essentially, you are buying a keyboard, right, with the controls that you're used to seeing for switcher because it's video, and it has inputs and outputs, and that's the brain, okay? Now, but you're getting those options to have both that virtual. And yeah, so both, right? So software. So let's talk about both, right? Blackmagic would be both, right? You have software and hardware. You need them both to run together, but essentially the software is a virtual version of what's on the hardware. And what's very good about Blackmagic is that the software kind of is the same across the board between an A10 Mini and a 2ME switcher.
Yes.
Right. So and what changes is that virtual input change. You have more options or less options depending.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can go the other route, right? Now let's go Carbonite, or let's go Grass Valley, right? Those switchers are a brain, or a Hannibal Forest switcher. Right? Those are pretty popular down here too. They have a brain and they have a switcher. And in my mind, the switcher at this point is a keyboard, right? It's a keyboard for the input and output, which is where the brain runs. Now the evolution is that we're coming out to now the brains have more control, more flexibility, more a GUI system, a better user interface for the operators. So now that hardware and software thing is kind of coming together. But really, with media service, and this is a particularly corporate AV. So again, if anybody's in a different environment, even in broadcast, I mean, I can debate a little bit on broadcast, I can debate a little bit on sports, but in corporate, media servers are being used a lot more, right? So does a video switcher need to have all the bells and whistles if we're just going to use it to switch cameras? That's my view of this topic, right?
So if we're just using it to switch cameras, is your personal preference, I'm going to assume, is an actual physical hardware switcher in front of you, correct?
Yes, 100%. So I would love. I
was going to say it's so much easier. And the conversation that we were just having prior to me, if it's a smaller breakout, I would rather have a hardware switcher right in front of me, regardless of what my inputs. They could be camera feed from the room, whether they're my Zoom presentations or whatever the case is that I want to project up to that screen and I need to switch. It's kind of easy to have that hardware switcher in front of you. Some of these software switchers, they're able to do so much, but is it convenient for you to be able to have to go through all of these different processes, kind of looking for where your clicks are? And I just saw Jeff Keighley said, instead of calling it a keyboard, call it a control surface. And he's absolutely correct, because what do we do with these softwares? We look for ways to assign these cues and whatnot to our control surface, but we know they're keyboards or whatever, so that we can still control them physically. I don't know. What you think?
No, I agree. And real quick shout out to everybody who's here with us tonight. I see Ray's here. I see Jeff's here. And Jeff made a good point. Right? Instead of calling it a keyboard, call it a control surface. I will admit it is called a control surface, right? Let me not be disrespectful to what it is. However,
yes.
Going back to the evolution of what is going on, right? It is essentially, there's a brain somewhere that controls everything, and there's a keyboard or control surface. But it is just plugging into something else that's controlling everything, right? Even for example, with an E2, the E2 is a media server. That E2 has a controller, a control surface. It could be a keyboard, right? Because you're just plugging it into the system, and it's reading data from the brain and it's doing stuff. But the processing is being done somewhere else. Now, what Blackmagic and TriCaster? Well, let's go to TriCaster real quick, right? Let me backtrack here. TriCaster's all in one, software and hardware. You buy the whole package together, right? So there's some different examples, right? And I'm trying to look at Jeff's comment here where it said the point of a control surface is having quicker access to variables in the software. Okay, so that brings me back to what we said earlier, right? So the control surface now is becoming a quick tool or access to modify things, right? And it's so that we're used to controlling things a certain way. Oh, from Virginia, nice. So we're controlling things a certain way now. I know Chuck's in the background here, so if you want to bring in Chuck, you can bring in Chuck. And before I dive into deep into this conversation, I want to hear some of Chuck's input. I know we're talking to the chats here. What's up, Chuck?
What's up, guys?
So if you guys don't know, Chuck is
What's up, Chuck?
legend himself. Chuck, before we keep diving down this, man, I want to hear your 2 cents on the topic.
Well, I started back on Ross and Grass Valley switchers when I first learned, and back with the big old thick buttons and all kinds of controls. And I've used TriCasters. I've used Vmix. I've played with. Have you guys ever heard of Pixera? I think that's AV Stumple. Mm-hmm. I like their media server, but that's what I was texting you earlier, Omar. Is like when you talk about media servers, to me that's a scripted event type of tool. Right. Whereas when I have a control surface or an ATEM 2ME control surface in front of me, I'm playing that thing live. Right. That's a little bit more live video switching in my experience anyway. Now I have used some of the other software tools, playing around with, we've done Wirecast in the past, and I think it's the right tool for the job. I don't think they're ever going to go away. And that was your tagline, right? Is like, Are they obsolete? And look at essentially what the ATEM minis have done for the prosumer market this year, right? It's introduced all these people. And honestly, I'm one of the moderators of one of the ATEM mini Facebook groups. And half of our time is explaining to people where that history of the layout of the buttons, the upstream key and downstream key, and where all that comes from.
I love that stuff.
right? Well, yeah, but most people, you think about it, they're getting an A10 Mini for the first time, and they're like, why is it a T-bar? Like, no one knows that this is a T-bar, right? And they don't understand that. So I think, yeah, it's like a lot of things. Like, look at people, young people today, when they see a rotary phone, right? Like, we understand how a phone works because it used to be based on tones, and that's what the push buttons are replicating. And it used to be that they had to have, a rotary to make those certain number of tones. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's the same way with switchers, I think. It's like you have the fundamentals.
Right.
And that carries over now, but we're starting to see these crazy new now. I'm jealous, Omar. You got to attend the Ross training on that. I want to hear about that. But
I can tell you guys some stuff here when we get there.
I remember when we first got our first DVE.
Okay.
Because I was in college at the time, and it was the first switcher that actually had a DVE to be able to do some of these different transitions. And it's just like software, right? You get 30 transitions that you'll never use.
Yeah.
But you have one that you might, I don't know about you. I get excited when I have some kind of like a 80s band or something, and I get to use a funky transition. I'm like, I'm going to push that.
No. For concerts, I think switches are great, right? When you have a lot of camera feeds in. But let me ask you, Chuck, for let's say and we'll just do this the last 2 years, right? I'll go a little further back. The last 2 years, what have you really used a video switcher for, though?
Oh, for me, okay. So remember this about me. I'm one of those camp, and Jeff and I have talked about this. Jeff Kethley, I'm one of those camp who prefers the hardware route. Like we started using Vmix at the start of the pandemic, and then we quickly got rid of it and bought a 2ME 4K.
Okay.
Because I was having trouble with latency. I was having trouble with inputs and outputs, configuring the cards. I was having trouble with Vmix call. I was having trouble getting people to come in on Vmix call.
Okay.
So we went more the hardware route. So for me, I trust hardware. I'm used to hardware. Now, that being said, my new job, because I've just recently moved on from hotel AV to virtual events full time, my new job, we're using a mixture of hardware switchers with some NDI in the mix to distribute some signals. Now, I don't have Vmix, but I am using NDI to get some things out for like a LED video wall.
I do that as well.
Yeah, it's going into Resolume. Actually, so yeah, I still prefer that method, but that's only because I got hung up on creating virtual Vmix in the cloud. And Jeff, if you're listening, I still plan on doing that someday. But because and VizRT blows me away. I would love to be using VizRT more in what I do, but I just don't have that opportunity yet.
Right. So let's touch on two things that we did here, right? We did, or we spoke about, sorry, because we weren't physically doing it. We spoke about how, oh, that was weird. There's an echo.
Sorry.
Oh,
yeah. I tried to open Facebook, but I still had your signal up, so I'm going to kill it.
So there's two things that's happening a lot the last 2 years, right? Now we've kind of transitioned from doing a sat truck to send something to us, and now we can do this all pretty much virtually or in the cloud at some form or another, right? We can Vmix call you in, we can StreamYard you in like we're doing here. We can bring you in a myriad of ways. A lot of the switchers are not really keeping up with that, right? So now we're using Zoom, for example. I'll use that very popular thing right now. Zoom is being ingested as a source into there, right? And I'll go a step further. We're taking NDI outs of Zoom,
yes,
and converting them to SDIs to come into the switcher, so that we have cameras, right? Mm-hmm. Cameras which are virtual. And then we're what you could also do with the media server, right? Eliminate that, because we're not worried about that, which was the benefits of the hardware was that there's low latency now, right? And input and output. But my source is going to one location, and most switchers, minus Blackmagic, and I'm saying this because I feel it coming in the comments, minus Blackmagic, most switchers, though, unless you have a third party buy-in, aren't streaming out to the cloud or to any product. You have to have something else in line to go that route. Now, to the switcher's defense, the last 2 years, this is, the last 18 months, really, it's been a rapid change in what can happen. So it's unfair to say, well, it wasn't an option 2 years ago, maybe it's development now, it's coming out. But majority of the stuff that I've been doing, media servers are covering that route. Media servers are better processing the information, right? The latency might be 2 to 3, which isn't a huge deal when you're streaming to the cloud anyways. But TriCaster is a great example. TriCaster, moving forward now, TriCaster brings in video calls virtually. It sends in, it does a whole virtual side. It's hardware and software built into one. So my real argument is there a difference now, right? That one is better than the other. There's always the argument, every product has its pros and cons, and there's one product that's better than another for the job that you're in, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Agreed. 1,000%.
And the TriCaster was TriCaster. Sorry. The TriCaster is fantastic though. It's got its pros and cons, and Jeff and we talked about this. So if Jeff's there, he knows exactly what I'm talking about. There's some things about that I'm just like, but it's a great switcher. Now the Ross has a lot of pros and cons, and it was very customizable, extremely customizable, and I can see tons of benefits to that. The layout was impressive because of the one I was using, which is Touch Drive, which is the Touch Drive Black. That one has 5 buttons, So I'm trying to do this. So it's 5, and then there's a space and 5. And when I do button mapping, I will do whatever my cameras are, blank button, graphics blank, whatever. But more and more, I can ingest that stuff and create my macros and take it in on a media server. And again, I'm primarily using a media server to bring in, or just a switcher just for cameras. And I'll even add to that, a lot of stuff that I've been doing lately when it comes to cameras are either a TriCaster sending to something else, which is a media server. And you can list them off: Aquilon, E2s, Ascenders, Pixeras, Spider. I've seen Spiders going out. I haven't personally been on a show, but I've seen Spiders being used a lot. Those are examples, right? And the switcher is just switching cameras. So there's all these benefits and all these functionalities that are happening that I don't see being used as much as they used to be used. Again, and am I wrong? Tell us in the comments or join us in the conversation if I'm wrong. What do you guys see happening out there in the market when it comes to what are you primarily using a video switcher for?
So the funny thing is, our conversation that we had prior to us jumping on this, I said, I'm like Chuck, where I like the actual physical hardware. But now for smaller rooms where I may be doing, let's say a breakout room, but let's say it's a complicated breakout where I may have multiple presentations, a camera feed, Zoom going out over NDI that's going to go up on the screen, things of the sort like that. I'd rather have a physical hardware switcher in front of me, low latency, and everything is right there. I have my inputs and outputs, what I need, everything right in front of me. And what I like about it too is it's quick diagnosis. I don't really have to worry about calls coming in via Vmix and everything, obviously, because I am going with the Zoom route. But for me, on that smaller setup, I prefer to have the physical switcher in front of me.
I agree with what you're saying here, and I agree with what Jeff said earlier, right? Having that physical switcher is a much better workflow to move around things quickly, right? I'm huge on macros. I'm huge. Like my main focus when switching is using macros. I have to we need to do a rehearsal. I need to build all these macros because I don't want to have to be doing a bunch of queues between my auxes, my programs. If I got multiple outs going out, I want it all to be in a macro, and just we're doing opening scene, macro 1, opening scene. We're doing this guy's coming on stage, hit that thing, and all my sets are going off. I don't want to have to worry about anything unless it's a last minute change, and it's, hey, instead of sending input whatever, it's output whatever to go to this screen, I want to see this instead. Okay, done. Take that macro, change that out, update, done. Okay, ready when you guys are, And a lot of my workflow, Chuck, I'll let you go. Sorry. A lot of my workflow when it comes to the macros comes from the training from the media server side to run it that way, so that it's like plug and play essentially, right?
Now, are you not like what we used to do is we used to use the switchers and then just have a GPI trigger to another device, right? And that would cue our playback, or that would cue, or sometimes even just signal the sound guy in the back. So you're saying with your media servers, you're building it all in, so it's one macro and you're triggering everything?
Well, not everything, just on the video side. There are some, like Vmix, I'll do that. I'll do some of the auto stuff. If I'm using Aquilon, I'll have control some of the auto stuff. Mainly what I try to do though is I just turn on AVF, audio, photo, video, so that when I take XYZ to screen, my audio is on, sending out to whoever needs to get sent to, right? That's my main concern with that. And then making sure if I do any kind of pips or like that, if there's too many people in there, that I'm not getting any kind of echo situation. So managing some of that stuff is kind of what I'm doing when I'm doing the video side and switching, right? But some switchers have limitations to that when it comes to the audio side of it. Between if I'm doing let's say a DV, for example, right? If I'm doing a DVE, it strips out the audio, so I have to do things a little bit differently to get that to work correctly. Versus the media server, it doesn't care. It's just seeing another layer as a pip and just saying, okay, here's this. There's audio. Do you want the audio on or off? Done.
Yeah, I'm a little unique. I spent a lot of time working for theaters and churches and stuff like that, where we were a little shorthanded on staff, but also, Omar, I know you know this. You know how your hands sometimes work faster than your mouth?
Yep.
So I was director and my own TD.
Oh,
right. So, and the reason why I'm saying that is because I got into the habit. I kind of old school. I miss the chatter on comms of ready and where you're building the macro. I used to queue 3 people. Does that make sense? Right. And I don't know. There's something to me about keeping it separate that just seems a little bit more sturdy and reliable, but then there's more people involved, and of course people are points of failure just like hardware. So I don't know, I'm just posing the question. All right, it sounds like we got a bunch of comments coming up.
Yeah, I was gonna say we've been having some comments and questions come in.
So I'm gonna start up. I see Kent Daniels is checking in from Chittenden, Virginia. Chris here is, I just wrapped up 3 days of TriCaster training, so switching better still be relevant. And it will be. I'm not saying it's going to go away. I'm just saying what is the extent that we're using it. TriCaster is a great piece of product, but again, TriCaster, we talked about here for a second, right? It is software and hardware into one, and they give you a control surface, which I'm calling a keyboard because really, you're plugging into a brain that has everything in there. Sapphire Sky says, for me, I end up usually using Companion, Stream Deck, whether it's a physical switch or software, so the control ends up being the same regardless of the sense. Okay, that brings me to another point that I'm glad brought up. With Companion, right, or Stream Decks, more and more operators, because they become so familiar with using these and they're building all these presets, which makes it easier for them to do their job. Blackmagic, for example, you can't run the software and the Companion at the same time, so you end up running one or the other. If you have all these cues ready to go and essentially macros ready to go, my keyboard now is my Stream Deck. It's a shot box, but it's my Stream Deck, and I'm just going in and saying, this is my input, these are my outputs. You're going to do this. You're going to go here. But it's
I want to mention there was something about that. So my last gig that I did, I had software up on my laptop in front of me. I had a 2ME control surface in front of me that I had button mapped for everything that I needed on the fly. I had 2 Stream Deck XLs. One was my master control. Every button I hit on that main screen changed my second Stream Deck to all of my aux outputs, all of my routing, and I even had timer control and playback start stop. So I was doing all 3, and at that point it's kind of using all the tools together to function as a media server, right? But with a traditional with a traditional thing. So we have 2 licenses of QLab, and I have QLab. I have a button on my one Stream Deck, and it just changes Stream Deck 2 to go right to my QLab interface. Then I hit another button, it goes to my timer, and I'm changing the timer input. And then I hit another button, and I'm like, okay, route the center screen to this output.
Which brings me back to, we are now, right, this brings me to what I said about Vmix. We are now taking software and creating control surfaces or keyboards and mouses to run that software. So, what are we doing with the technology moving forward that we are, what's the happy medium we're using? And again, what I find fascinating about Companion and I'm a user too, so like I get it. I can build something a certain way for myself, save that, and then on a show, bring my Excel, bring my files, upload that, and be ready to go much quicker than the older methods, right? Because I can have all these presets kind of ready to go, or I can just modify it, a little here, a little there, because generically I'm doing the same thing over and over again, right? It's different ballrooms all over the world, pretty ballrooms, but it's similar gear. But again, you're taking software, QLabs, Vmix, OBS, and you're adding another controller to it, right? So Mark here says, anyone using Roland switchers? I'm currently using the VH1 HD and pretty happy with it. I'll let you go first.
Yeah, well, I want to say, so our go-to for our smaller events, now we always had a Barco Image Pro, I think. which one's the switcher? I always forget. One's the size adjuster and one's the switcher. I know we had that for some of our big events, just for stability. But we had for our smaller ballroom events, I was happy with a Roland VR4 HD. Now that one does have USB out as well, and it does function as a USB webcam as well. But we loved the Roland VR4 HD almost more so than the A10 Mini, and the reason why is XLR inputs and faders. And the only problem is it's about a $2,500, and in the 3 years that we've owned it, the price has never gone down. Okay. Another great switcher for starting out in AV where it's a little bit bigger and you want a switcher that will work for you is the Roland, is the VR60, their medium range one. I think
V60.
The V60, yeah. So that one's a great one. But yeah, that Roland VR4, I have to say, though, one thing that's happened in the recent couple of years is sometimes it loses sync to USB to the computer and it'll reset its preferences. But that just, usually I just restart and do that. But yeah, the little Roland switchers, they're great.
So I'll tell you my one caveat with it. And again, this is one of those things where, and this isn't really related to the topic, but I have more than one. I have two things about Roland's that I'm not a fan of. One is that the menu goes out on program. So once I'm live, I can't really dive into that menu anymore if I want to change something on the fly. And two, and if memory serves right, the other problem I have with it is that only one of my inputs is scalable and not the others. So I'm kind of limited in that functionality. But again, this like someone said here in one of the comments, the simplicity of it, right? Same thing with Blackmagic is very just, hey, it does this. This is what it does. It's meant for this. Done. Like I get it. I got it. Plug it in. Send out what I got to send out.
Well, and those are great for the guys that are doing the recordings of concerts. You know, 2-camera, right. Quick setup, drop it in. This is all you're doing. A/B switching, right? Just A/B switching, maybe a third input. It's also good because you have, well, I don't know about the V1, but the VR4, you have audio monitoring right there with you. And I like the fact that I had the XLR and the faders. Cool. Yeah, and that was really cool. And it was super easy for just a basic PIP and a basic side-by-side. It was just one button hit. And it worked great for on-site. I did bid openings for local municipal things and stuff like that. Someone's asking about your headset.
Yeah, so this headset, I wish I had the answer for you. There is a mastermind behind all this right now who is in my office, and if she could turn around, there should be a box somewhere that says what they are. And I want to say something like R50 or R5000. I don't remember the exact brand, James. I apologize. But it'll get in the comments in a little bit. I'm sure she's looking for it. It's like behind her desk in a box on the ground somewhere that just says, I think it's like GR5500 or G5500, something like that.
That's like the fourth set of numbers you mentioned, by the way.
I know, it was 500. It's like the brand name. I don't remember. I will say Bodie is the one who recommended these because I was at Best Buy for like 2 hours trying to get something done, and I was like, I was actually trying to get in-ears. All right, let's be real. I was trying to get in-ears. I went to Best Buy because they had them on the webpage, and they were like these Bose ones that fit in your. They were super nice. They didn't have them in stock. They didn't have a lot of earphones in stock, which wasn't surprising. But I needed a wired because I had too many Bluetooth stuff going on because I was doing like a week-long streaming event, and what I do is I try to do like the one to talk on comms. I do with Bluetooth, right? So I could put it in my ear, and I have a little like sport one I wrap around. And then I had these headphones, Vmix something, I can't remember, Vmix something, which like literally just crush your skull. And I use that to listen back to the live side so that I can monitor everything. And I was like, I need to switch this out. I need like something I just plug in my ear, get it done with it, and just go through my mixer, make my life easier. So I ended up buying these guys because they were just super easy, and it came with this, and they were like $80. Highly recommend them though. They sound great. They're really, really comfortable. They have a little band up here. It's comfortable. They're adjustable on this side, so you can go a little higher or lower. These ear cups are great. If you got, just take this off.
And the link below for the affiliate marketing.
Yeah, I need to go and hit them up real quick and be like, hey,
seriously.
But no, it's super great. And this thing is cool. So if you clip it up real fast, audio's gone, right? You can't hear me. Audio goes away. So it's really cool. It's really convenient. It's super lightweight. Doesn't hurt. And for me, because I like doing the Bluetooth thing. I can put my sport headphones in that are Bluetooth into the same ear, and then like when it's the best design, I switch out ears. But then I can put this over it, and it makes it very easy for me to continue to not only listen to the boss or the client, but also do my stream and still hear back what's going on.
Copy that.
So James,
you asked or there was a question that was asked about what was the best equipment that they purchased for their business, and there's some comments that's been coming in. So we had Sapphire Sky says, well, the Stream Deck again, my portable LCD monitors, decimators, that's a go-to. Both scaling and non, my ever-growing vast collection of various cables and dongles, probably top the list. Dongles always top the list.
Top of the list.
Top the list.
Decimators are definitely a win. I have 2 decimators. I've had them for a long time. I have, and it's a little expensive, I have radio PCDI boxes. So it does XLR in and USB out. Those have been fantastic for like these last minute kind of things I have to do when it comes to audio input or outputs into a PC. I personally bought the Blackmagic 810 ISO Pro. I have a love-hate for it, but it definitely comes in handy last minute with a lot of different things, to just have that ability to just put that in line and use it real quickly for like last minute pop-ups.
Yeah, you got multi-view on that, HDMI and SDI outs on that as well. All right. And you use that more so for when you're on your streaming gigs, right?
So here's what I actually use. So I own a, oh man, I'm so bad. I own a laptop. Sorry. You know what? Let me just grab it. Give me a second, guys. Sorry.
So we had Salvador answer about that as well. He says Vmix and Unity Intercom by far has provided the most bang for the buck. I agree on Unity. Unity is super streamlined, and a lot of people don't use it for whatever reason. So definitely recommend that one.
Even Unity Cloud. I used Unity Cloud with just 10 licenses for the longest time. I will say that having it running on a Mac is much more stable, and I do like that. But I gotta say, Unity Cloud has worked with me to direct from Vermont. I directed camera crews in California and another camera crew in Orlando or Miami at the same time.
Sweet.
And it was great.
So I'll tell you, we were doing a virtual gig where presenters were coming in from. Every presenter, it felt like, was coming in from a different state, and they were all dealing with the meeting planners were in one separate location, and then everyone who was actually working the gig was in a separate location. So we were keeping in contact with them via Unity, all behind the scenes, while making sure that everything, like I said, it worked perfectly well for us. They could give us the little the next cell chirp, and we're available. So it worked out well. I really like Unity.
You know what I'd add to it is, if anybody's got the Holy Land little wireless packs, it's like a little 2-pack. I can't remember the exact, but it's from Holy Land.
Holy Land Mars?
Holy Land, not the Mars for the video, but for the audio side. They have
the audio side. Oh, I haven't seen those. Yeah,
they're like, I think it's like $300, and they're small, but you can clip them onto here and get audio, or you can do a lav. It comes 2 packs.
Nice.
Yeah, the box comes with the charger. I've used it probably 2 times since I got it, and both times it was just like we have this here, let's plug it in, and it worked out really great, and the cables were there, and it was like a little, impromptu that just came up as a handy little tool to have for the show. So that one I think is another good one. It's pretty cheap and affordable, and kind of like you just throw in your backpack and it's ready to go when you need it.
Michael, that sounds like a serious headset. I want to see that headset that Michael's talking about.
MDR 7506. So Omar, you was telling us about your setup. You went to grab your machine. So I'm assuming this is your Vmix machine. So I noticed it's a PC.
Yeah, so a GE66 Raider, right, with Vmix
MSI.
on it.
Yep,
from MSI with Vmix on it, with in tow, and this is some of where this idea came from. I have a Blackmagic 810 switcher, the rack-mountable one, which is 8 inputs, 4 HDMI, 4 SDIs, and then my program goes out to a Blackmagic Representer, not the newest one that came out, but the original one. So those 2 plus this has gotten me tons of work where I either become the in-house doing the stream out to the world, or I become
the streaming department.
the streaming department. Yeah, and because I have the setup, I just sell the setup package plus myself, and it's all built in a case. The one thing that I was gifted by a close colleague was a Barco Matrix 8x8 switcher. And by close colleague, I mean my father. He got it for me. A matrix switcher, and that now takes my inputs and outputs and just now I have just 8 more to do, so I can route to different things. So when you're doing another DSM or multiple screens, or whatever, I use that like as a trick to kind of get more outputs and inputs into my switcher to increase my limits essentially. And so far, I've maxed it out every show I've been on. I've maxed out that matrix switcher. Yeah.
So I can't say a whole lot. But the new studio that I'm down here to manage, we have 2 40x40s, 3 16 multi-views, and 6 4x4s going into a constellation.
Oh yeah, there you go. See, and again, but it's harder, right? So like you have
but
all
I can
these
send anything anywhere,
right? And you have all these brains which are just going to the constellation, which is a control surface. We're calling keyboard here. Basically controlling all these things, right? And here's the thing: if you were, which I'm sure you are, but if you were networked and you were plugged into it, you could, if the controller died or you didn't have it, you could still control this from the software. So it's like
that's true. That is so true.
This hesitation we have with software is kind of getting taken down a little bit.
No, that's an interesting point, and I want to back that up because I've mentioned it a couple times. So basically, I had an AV company doing virtual events in California. I've been hired by a new company in South Carolina. My A10-2ME that we used to use, I didn't invest in a control surface, Omar. I did everything through 2 companions. I had 2 companion Stream Deck XLs, and I set up everything on the workflow that I needed for that show. So in a sense, I was doing it that way, right? Like I was using just companion, and then I always had a laptop near me, just an i3, just a little cheap laptop with the software ready in case I needed to change a super source or do something different. But yeah, it's essentially that workflow. Like, okay, I don't need the big T-bars and buses and banks of buttons anymore. I really just need to think about my workflow, program a macro, and push it.
I was just about to, you stole the word. I was just going to say it's actually about the amount of program you take. If you take that time and you program it ahead of time, you'll make your workflow so much easier than yourself. Which, speaking of that, that's one of the things that I love about the virtual switchers, so to speak, that there's so much automation you can set up. I was doing a show, I don't know, have you guys ever used the Livestream Studio 6 switcher?
Oh, yeah.
So I set the countdown on that. It was probably a 15-minute countdown. And by the time that 15-minute countdown hit, it would come off of the main slide, introduce what would be probably whatever the intro video was. It was cued to actually decrease the volume on the intro music. Everything was set up, complete automation. So you are switching, but you can hit one button and have like 4 commands follow it. So there's ups and downs. There's pros and cons to both sides.
No, and I'll throw one out there. One of the things I hate about the software only side, which is like even for Vmix, I plug in a keyboard and I will use the keyboard as a switcher. And this goes back to what you had said earlier, Chuck, and what Jeff had said earlier. I like the ability for that hardware side that gives me to be very quickly to navigate everything. Because sometimes, especially like all props to all you guys that run this way, you guys are mad geniuses. Props to you. But for me, that hesitation of that button not going fast enough when I'm trying to, or that like, oh man, I gotta go to this aux button, I gotta click here, versus hold down aux and click and I'm done. Like those little quick things, I love that a lot. And it's like it's their default for you, right? If I do the companion, I gotta program that and make that a thing. I don't got time for that. I want to be able to real quickly, tap, send, So that's my one hesitation, like versus just being all software versus being harder. But again, my biggest thing is there I see more and more options coming out for what you can do with the switchers, but I see them being used less and less.
That's
because
true.
Media servers are taking over, or the ability to do that is kind of go. And honestly, Vmix to me is more of a media server than it is a switcher at this point. And a lot of things we're doing with switchers, we're creating that media server ability for the switcher to run in that method. But what Trent is saying, you have a matrix that's plugged into these. You have multiples of these, so you can control, send anything to anywhere. The controller is allowing you to do that very quickly. But if you have a media server, you could see in a much, well, it depends on what you're running, but you could see all your inputs, right? You can see where your outputs are going. You can get a visualization of all that stuff going out. And then on your input side, you would just say, okay, I want to see input blah, blah, to go to this output. And then you're going to send this out, unless you're, and I don't know what the setup is, but unless that rack is right next to you, you can look at the little monitor to kind of see what's going on. But if it's in another room, because it's just more convenient that way, you have to really have confidence in what you're doing and what you're routing, because if you're wrong, you're not going to see it, right? And with the media servers, you just have that snapshot of visualization of what's going on versus with the switcher sometimes. And if I'm wrong, please someone correct me. But that's my opinion of that, right? Because we are creating, and I love hardware, but we're creating switches to run more like a media server, and it's because we're evolving in the needs of what we need to do, right? But not exactly what the switches are able to do sometimes. And for me, it's like, yeah, I can bring in graphics and videos and the cameras. Really, I want the cameras on this because it's going to give me the best quality possible in and out. The rest of the stuff, I can just send straight to the media server guy, and he'll take care of all that and send it to where it's got to send out.
So Joe has an interesting point. It's like, and you guys out.
Joe the Max.
Why are we still routing all this? And along with that, Joe, I want to post a question. And this is I'm one of these guys. So when you hear me say this, understand that I'm saying this about me. But do you think a lot of the development of the switchers and the control surfaces is really just kind of catering to the old guard, that's what they learned on? They understand those fundamentals, whereas there's so many different new ways of doing it with software and media servers that it's going to be a transition out of the old ways. I mean, like, think about a car interface, right? There's still some analog. You still have a stick style shifter on some cars because that's what people like to feel. They like to reach down here and shift gear and shift out of reverse or park. But then you have some newer cars that it's really just a dial, right? Or something like that. So those type of interface changes, do you guys think that a lot of this is still just holdover from, I mean, the engineers are still the old guys who used it when they were coming up.
I think some of it, yeah, I think some of it is that, right? There's a lot of older guys that they understand this workflow a lot. I mean, Joe Max just brought up a very good point too about, E2s when it comes to E2s and how they work versus the amount of MEs. But that just goes to what you're saying, right? So like, if I'm using a media server, I'm taking in content, I'm sending it out, I have all these options, right? In order for me to get more abilities with my switcher, I need to add another ME, right? So now you're seeing more and more switches that have 2 MEs standard or 4 MEs, and I'm going between multiple, which is it's a pre-programmed bank on another output, right? Or more inputs. But the MEs, so like the one I just did, it's 2 MEs and then 4 mini MEs, and I can program that in a big way, and it gives me a lot of stuff. So I can definitely run it that way, but it's not as easy, right? And it's not as quick, because it's a little more I have to do here and there. Are you
saying versus a control surface where you just hit, okay, now I'm on ME4 and this is what I want called up on ME4 and then this is ME3. Right. And then I just go back to my main bank and I just transition into what I have on ME4. Yeah, that is faster workflow, but I think that's going to get better. And with planning, right? With planning, you could do that even on the bigger media servers.
Yeah. Yes. So we got about 15 minutes left in this episode, so to speak. Still a lot more comments and things coming in. So I want to bring it back in because we're doing a lot of positives and pros for both sides. So what do you really foresee Omar, I want you to answer first. What do you see what do you think the future is looking like for the future of switchers and media servers, especially media servers, because they're growing at a much faster pace, correct? So what do you foresee the future, or at least where our industry is headed? I don't foresee them like the hardware being obsolete, but what do you think is going to happen, so to speak?
I think in order for you to get the best video quality possible, you should go through a switcher, 100%. Anything else outside of that, you should go to a media server. And the reason I say this is because there's a huge crunch for costs because of the events we're doing, that having a smaller just punch box, and I hate to say punch box, that's not the right word, but a smaller switcher that just takes in video and sends it out with no latency at a high quality to the media server guy who's going to do, which now is becoming more hybrids, right? We have either two MEs or whatever. There's one controlling the live and one controlling the virtual. I think media servers just do it better and quicker and faster and are more reliable than switcher. And again, to Chuck's point, or to the comment, if I was an older gentleman who was maybe, 20 years doing it with a switcher, maybe the switcher is faster than using it. I'm just not as comfortable with it, right? I like to have more visual cues and control of like what I'm sending out before I send it out, and I'm not confident enough. That could be it too. But for me, I just feel like it should just be used for cameras to bring that in, and everything else should go into the media server. It'd just be easier for me streaming and for the live.
Okay. What about yourself, Chuck?
Well, I'm really fascinated by what like Livestream Studio 6 is able to do, what VizRT is able to do, and some of these other software-based switchers. Yeah, but as far as that also functions sort of as a media server as well. And I'm not just saying it because you're here watching, Joe, but I envision like someone really nailing down the best of Vmix, the best of E2, and the best of that into a great software package. And then like anybody can configure a controller however they want it for what they do, and then central control just works, to control it. So, but I could see that happening where everything is customizable for how you're. So, Omar, you do big ballroom shows. There are people who are just sports broadcasting, right? And what they really need is they need fast graphics and data input from different live scoring hardware.
Correct.
And then there's people who are doing bands and concerts and stuff like that. And then there's the people who are just doing fundraisers. All of those are different workflows, but they're right now forced to pretty much all follow what was originally invented for broadcast.
Yep.
Does that make sense? Like they're doing the broadcast workflow, and I don't think that necessarily still has to be the case. They're starting to change it now with some of what they do, but I can't tell you all day long. I'm answering questions who are people who are just trying to do. And I don't mean this. Yeah, well, I was going to say social media style production, but with ATEM software, with ATEM hardware that's based on broadcast principles. And it's not clicking for them. And so a lot of it is explaining, well, this is why it does it that way. Or this is why frame rate is important and it has to match and stuff like that. So I don't know. I do see that I think there'll always be switchers. There's always going to be simple buttons that just go through. I mean, do you know how many people have ATEM minis out there who have never taken it off of cut bus ever?
I don't, but I would be
so many.
Yeah,
like they don't even know it's an option. Like for you and I, that's ridiculous. How could you not preview your next source?
See it and be like, do you not know this is doing this? What do you mean?
How can you not preview your next source and make? But to them, they don't think that way. They just think, okay, now I want this camera. No, I want this camera. So.
It's like, hey, let's bring it to the 1980s, where we changed AB to pre-program. This is a whole new world now.
Yeah, exactly.
So I saw a comment here that Chuck Wojda had pointed out. Chuck Wojda, sorry, Joe Master. Chuck Wojda, I think it is a very interesting point to my previous comment. I like to work with a companion of both a traditional switcher panel and a stream deck, which again brings me back to the point. Joe is using, and he mentioned earlier above somewhere else too, that he likes to use the surface. I always have a proper switcher surface, LC11, TY150, X keys, etc., and then a couple of stream decks and shot boxes for show specific stuff. So again, you're taking the software, right, and you're giving it this control surface, a controller or a keyboard to modify, which is what you were saying, Chuck, to make it easier for you to use. So, but are you using it for what's intended for, which is to switch the video sources, or are you using it just for, or are you pushing its limits and using it for something like more of a media server? Is where my argument goes to constantly with this conversation. And what's really good about the ATEMs is that I came from a Barco house. I did 6 years with nothing but Barcos for a long time before I freelanced and learned about all this other stuff that's going on there. Blackmagic Design to me is they covered the spectrum, right? You could be an advanced broadcast user and use this switcher, or you can be the guy doing a stream show and just use this little basic one here. And that easeability to be able to go from that to the next, once you understand, like Chuck is saying, the fundamentals of what a video switcher can do, it's very easy to upgrade that, right? It's more of grasping, well, now I have multiple MEs, so I could do this and this to 2 different locations, and now I have more DVEs to do more things, and now I have a keyer, and now I have a background that I have to make sure is up when I'm doing my keys versus when I don't have my keys on. And then, I have 4 keys here. And now it's not layers, it's keys. And is it key 1, 3, 4? Is it key 4, 3, 2, 1 for that? And then you can combine things. So like but Blackmagic kind of has like a workflow. Like, hey, get the mini A10 and then get the studio and then get the 4K. And kind of evolve that stepping stones, right? But again, Blackmagic just offers both hardware and software. Versus some of the other guys that are now, I'm seeing it more and more, are giving you both of those options, right? So now we're just kind of, I feel like we're at apex, right? There's hardware and software, but it comes down to really price, what's best for the show you're doing, and what works for you as an operator. And Joe DeMax is a great operator. It's amazing what he does, and he's combining multiple things so he can push, in my opinion. Which I don't know, Joe, if I'm wrong, let me know. But you're really pushing these programs to the limits to do a lot of things that a lot of guys, I guarantee a lot of guys aren't doing it by themselves.
Yeah,
but even Chuck, you're doing the same thing. Chuck, you're doing a studio where you're definitely pushing your matrices out, so you have an abundance of inputs and outputs, more than what the Constellation does a lot, right? It has 4 MEs, but it's like it typically just goes to one brain. You're using multiple brains. So now you're really pushing what you can do with that. And you have to internally be able to process. ME1 is going to this one, which has these inputs. ME2 is going to this one, which has these inputs. But in the Constellation, I have one big controller, and I have one button that says ME1, ME2, ME3, and it's all the same thing, but it's going somewhere else. And I have to know where that somewhere else is going, because I also have auxes that I can send to other places and outputs that I can send to other places.
Joe says I'll push everything to its limits.
Yeah, I believe it too. So you see Paula's question about a good portable mixer to take to venues and stuff. And I honestly think the ATEM Extreme line is the absolute best for the money right now. However, like I mentioned before, I am partial to the Rolands with the faders on them, because it's more audio control. Because if you've tried to work with audio within your ATEM, you'll quickly hate everything about it. But I think that you can do it, but I like to have, I'd rather even have like a little Behringer or like a Mackie or something, or a really great mixer. Yeah, a really great mixer actually is the Allen, and he is ZI-10. And that one interfaces pretty well into the A10 Mini, but I would still have a different audio mixer going into the A10 Mini or into the camera. More importantly, if you can get into the camera, then you're going to have less latency.
Oh man, you just gave me an idea. We could do a talk. I've been wanting to do this for a while. So why aren't more people with the Blackmagic designs, right? Why aren't they? So if you didn't know this, right? If you have a Blackmagic switcher and you plug it into your switch, to a network hub, network switcher, you can have multiple people come in to that switcher or to the switcher itself virtually and control the switcher, control the audio part of it, control the
camera shading,
hybrid deck, the camera shading, all at the same time from different machines. You can all be plugged into this one machine, each of you having a different job for that one machine.
There is a finite number of connections, and I forget what it is. If someone knows it, put it in the chat. I think it was I don't think it went up to 10. I think it was less than that, but there is a certain number of connections. But Fairlight is supposed to be a great audio mixer, and they have all these tools in it. But the problem is all the switchers, even the Constellation, has really poor audio ins.
5.
Yeah.
You got 5. They're blowing it up. 5.
Yeah, everybody's at 5.
Okay. That's what I thought it was. I thought it was 5 connections because you can only have 5 people connected at once. Yep. Jeff is there. But yeah, I see the potential there to, if you had what's Jeff saying? True ME switcher use is very powerful when you need to manage multiple outputs. Yes, it is. And a person who knows how to manage those MEs quickly is invaluable in a production.
And I'll give that to Jeff. That's one of, and I've been waiting for someone to really point it out. There was another one that came up here. I'll bring up, but Jeff brings up the one biggest thing about a switcher that media servers are not best for, right? Is the ability to have multiple MEs and to control multiple things and send out to multiple locations. That in itself is very quick and easy to do once you grasp that concept, right? And that's something that media servers do very well. Software does not do that. Media servers don't do that very well, right? They take in a lot and they send out. Particularly, there is a way to do that. It's not as user friendly as what the MEs are doing already as a switcher. So that's one reason why I agree with you guys that it won't happen. There's another comment here by sorry, I gotta find it real quick. Doug Wiggins makes another one. Video switches are typically a sub-switch of a large screen management system, right? This is the ideal scenario that I see happening more and more that should be happening. Which, I just feel like we're in this cusp where it's media servers and video switches are able to do a lot of the same things. And at what point is it going to be one or the other? And it might never be that, right? But for example, Disguise just came out with an article today that their processes are now fast enough to give you no latency with live video into their Disguise servers. So, it's coming. It's coming.
Yeah, I definitely want to find an excuse to play with Disguise and some of that. But all right, Salvador Garza says MEs are analogous to tracks in video editing. They just get in the way when you need to tell a story. Vmix is more akin to trackless editing. I'm not sure I completely agree with that, but I see where you're coming from with it, because if you've ever had a large production, like for instance, I had a production where I had to send back to a remote studio where the host was. I had to send back a completely different mix from what was going live to air. And that was all done on ME2. And I just knew whatever I switched on ME2, like she didn't need to see the super source. She didn't need to see the layouts and the graphics that were coming up. She just needed to see the person full screen that she was interacting with. So for that, it was just quick, cut the main program on ME1, cut the other program on ME2. Now, how would you do that quickly in Vmix, especially if it's changing all the time?
Yeah, you wouldn't.
That's where I think it's a little different that way, Salvador. Now, normally, you're right. Normally, a lot of people use MEs to just stack effects, right? So they're just doing an effect here, and then they're going to stack that over the next ME to bring it in. Like we do that if we're trying to layer a key over a super source over something else, right? That's what we would do that using MEs. Yeah.
No, and Jeff just said here, I'm referencing real ME switchers, not really the DMD concept. I could send 8 separate mixes with different looks from my TriCaster 2. And I agree with you. And my referencing was, I was thinking about the Ross Carbonite when I made that comment. So, MEs are good for that. I feel that and this is actually, I think Jeff just unlocked something, right? This is actually a point where I think the people that can operate that, and I apologize if I
Jeff will correct you. Jeff will correct you.
Oh, no, I apologize if anybody feels like I'm rude, but the older generation that is really comfortable with this workflow is kind of getting out versus, and I'll give an example that I just thought of. If you're a Vmix operator, right, you can take that input, you can add all your stuff and make a timeline for yourself, right? Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. With a switcher, that's not really the way you do it. You got to know this coming. Okay, I'm going to take this to this and take this overlay here and this DV here and this source to this source and combine things. It's a little different workflow. But the ability to run multiple things from one console is common now, and that market I think is shrinking right now. So if you're looking for work out there, Ross Carbonite's doing training. I just did one. And there's others coming up. There's another one coming up. They just did in Georgia. Did it here that they're doing in Texas next? There goes Jeff. So
there's that comment that you were looking for.
So, Austin, I think we're tuning out.
Put that comment out. I want to see it.
So Jeff says older. What does that mean exactly? And all I'm saying is
what he meant is this is the older episode of next week. So
what I'm saying is the men that built this industry, 30, 40 years ago, who really pioneered us, they need
the
to train
Mount
the next
Rushmores of this
generation.
industry.
Next generation, right? Because and here's the thing, honestly, when it comes to hardware switches, right? And maybe this is what's selling me here, and not the age thing, but what's selling me, I think, is that I am doing a lot more shows, and I'm seeing a lot more shows where you almost can't run it with a 1ME anymore. If you're going to do a hybrid event, you need that 2ME option. And the media servers now are really just being used for the on-site stuff, and the 2MEs, one's going to virtual and one's going to the hybrid side, and then they're going into something else to do the whole, whatever. But I will say, including in sports and stuff like that, Jeff, you do not see a 1ME being used at all. It has to be a 2ME, a 4ME, or more, just to make what we need to have now happen. And that's becoming more and more of the reality. And you can take an ME, go output to a Blackmagic web presenter or to a Pearl or to whatever, and you can send out separate lists from something. So in that aspect, right, if it is you have a good operator, then all the way to it. But this comes back to, again, a cost, right? So a lot of churches probably couldn't go that route, and the people that would run them probably would need a lot of training versus putting them on Vmix or Blackmagic. Just say, hey, here's some generic stuff to learn, and have fun.
Well, church production is its own strange monitor. Just use an ATEM4ME for screen management, but I hate to think about ME for layering. Yeah, no, Salvador, it's a workflow. You have to think about it, but it can do powerful stuff.
Definitely. So anyway, we passed that 9 o'clock mark. Omar, you want to keep going or?
No, let's close it out, brother. You do your thing. Make us sound magical right at the end, and then we'll play this.
Make it sound magical. I mean, we've been talking about a whole lot of goodies tonight, but honestly, there was a lot of information that's poured out here tonight, the same way how there is every night. Chuck, I want to tell you thank you again for coming on, being a part of this panel, and sharing the information with the community. We always appreciate it. And you've had everyone pretty much engaged, and they've been absorbing your knowledge. So hats off to you. That's why I took it off. Thank you again. Thank you again for being a part of this and sharing your knowledge with us this week. Did you have any closing comments or final words that you wanted to share with us?
No, I'm just grateful to be here.
I'll put him on the spot.
No pressure.
Well, Omar gave me this heads up earlier today, and I was like, oh yeah, I'll try to make it. And I'm just grateful for where I've come from. Like, I just happened to start in video in my 20s, and now here I am 45, and I'm still doing video every day, and I'm so grateful for that. And I'm super grateful for stuff like AV Educate and you guys and what we've all helped each other learn during this pandemic. And I think that this was an interesting topic, so I had to be a part of it because I want to hear what it is. I wish Jeff was on here because he'd set us straight, but.
Oh no, I was gonna say he stays in the comments and he sets you straight from there too. He's like, app.
Jeff, if you want to do a part 2, we're here.
Yeah. But it was thank you again. Like I said, it was an absolute pleasure. To the AV Educate community, thank you for being with us here tonight. Like Chuck said, he's been in the industry for all these years. He's seen the transition of how switchers has turned, how things have turned virtual, the use of media servers, and how things is changing in the industry. I hope that you took some time to absorb some of this knowledge and still understanding some of the older things, because that's what created the workflows for how the newer things work, so to speak. So I hope you guys tapped in and gained a whole lot of information tonight. And again, we look forward to seeing you guys next week. Stay tuned for the sponsors.